Argentina and other emerging markets have been making news recently. Their weakness has been consistent and has been quite troublesome for their currencies. As the currency weakens, it has a delayed but pronounced effect internally within these countries, as everything is priced in the reserve currency, the US dollar. Extreme devaluation hasn't even begun yet. Get ready. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at what's going on in Argentina. I've been covering this because it is so important to watch this country. It's not Venezuela, but look at what has happened. It has been victim of the contagion of terrible devaluations of currencies. We are witnessing that in several countries around the world, whether we are looking at Argentina, Brazil, Venezuela, Turkey, and so many more that I've been covering in 2018. I'm going to show you a chart on that. I'm going to show you a few charts today, in fact, then get into some articles. But I want to look at this first, directly out of Bloomberg. You're seeing the Argentina currency being devalued to the point at which it's 38 to the US dollar. It has come up a little bit since its lowest point. We are witnessing this going below 40 just recently, but now has come up a little bit. Maybe that have some renewed confidence, but it will not last long. This always gets worse. They can push it up temporarily, but ultimately this will show its true weakness. Now we have the currency here trying to be supported by rate hikes, trying to increase interest rates in order to make sure that this currency doesn't engage in a free fall. But guess what? Every time they do, it only makes matters worse. Intervention makes matters worse. If we just let it fall to the ground, it would then rebuild strong after that. But the government comes in, the central bank comes in with their intervention, they deplete the reserves, and I'll show you this in a second, and they only cause the worst parts of any crisis. We need to have a proper valuation of any asset, of any country, of anything, in order for order to be restored. How can it be restored if somebody's there holding it and preventing that from happening? Argentina's reserves have been declining significantly here, and despite the fact that the IMF comes in and gives them a whole bunch of money, it isn't enough to prevent the crisis. It never is enough. The IMF gives them money, they deplete the reserves, and then they ask for more money. And then they deplete the reserves, and then they're going to ask for more money. And then eventually they're going to say, well, we don't have any more money for you. And then what? Then they need to sell off assets. For pennies on the dollar, of course. Then they need to go to other countries. Hey, will you give us any money? And of course, all along, this country, in this case, Argentina, is going to lose out. Yes, they can get more money, but the terms that they have to accept are never favorable for the average citizen. Taking a look at this, just basically putting on top the currency as well as the reserves, okay? Basically covering the same information. And then we have this out of Bloomberg showing us throughout 2018 up until the end of August, the only currency that is positive here against the US dollar is the Mexican peso. Everything else has been suffering to one degree or another. Thailand's currency is practically flat. Hong Kong's practically flat. But let's take a look here today at the Argentine peso, down 50%. 50%. Turkish lira down 42%. Brazil's currency down 18%, South African rand about 16%, and so on. This is significant devaluation versus the US dollar that is occurring today. Imagine that 50% of your currency's value washed away in less than 1 year. What do you think this is going to do? Is it positive? I don't think so at all. Okay, some people think it's positive and it could be for exports, but hang in there for just a second. This is a translated article, so Obviously, it's not going to be perfect, but take a look at this. So the IMF has come in, they're making their demands. All right, so that's part of what this article is about. From the IMF, they insist with their original idea, the dollar must float freely. The price of the currency must be fixed by the market. They're telling them, stop supporting your currency. That's the IMF. Now, I agree that this would be, in the long term, very beneficial. Stop supporting it. Stop printing money. Stop using reserves. Stop doing all of this manipulation, and you can actually have free markets take hold, and you would see a plunge in the values, just like the stock market. Stop supporting it with quantitative easing. Yes, that would mean that they would crash. That would mean that housing would crash if they're going to stop supporting it with super low interest rates. But what happens? The assets find the bottom, they find the floor, and then investors come in and pick it up. And then suddenly you could have families that could actually afford to buy homes. You could have average individuals who could buy a few shares of these stocks. That's what occurs. But if you don't allow that revaluation to take place, you're going to have a very big problem. And that's what's occurring today. Now, the IMF, of course, they're not so innocent in this. They're suggesting to do this, they're going to take advantage. The IMF always takes advantage of all these countries. I talked about them in my books. And, there's a lot in here, but essentially it gets into those details. That's the point I wanted to make from this. I have a lot to cover, so I need to move quickly. This is directly from the IMF's own website. Argentina has to put in place a new economic plan that is designed to put the country's debt on a firm downward path, reduce inflation, and reinforce independence of the central bank. The plan, backed by a $50 billion standby arrangement from the IMF, that's a $50 billion bailout, just so you're aware, is expected to help restore market confidence in the country's economy. And of course, this will not be ending well in the near future. There's no way. Why did Argentina come to the IMF? Well, they've had some problems, some economic vulnerabilities. They've had some higher sovereign risk premium, short-term liquidity risks. Investors began selling their assets in pesos, and the government was having trouble paying its bills for the rest of the year. So here you go, $50 billion in the terms. If you read into it, they are always very, very tough. They say, look, you have to do these certain things, and we will tell you what you can do and what you cannot do. Big mistake. This is a huge problem to go to any other country, to go to any other supranational organization and get money, because it's not so easy. It's not like you're borrowing money from your family, all right? If you don't pay back, you got a very big problem ahead of you. And this could very well happen. They could default. And it's not a good thing. It's not as if, hey, we're scot-free. Absolutely not. Now, you have a cheaper currency. The benefit of this is that on exports, you're going to do very well, because you can come out, benefit from that. Think about it. If a country now has to pay 50% less on the amount of money, the money that something's going to cost, that's great, excellent news. But we've got an issue here. Argentina will impose taxes on exporters as it looks to balance its budget in 2019, a year earlier than planned, after the peso collapsed last week and investors' concern grew about the government's ability to finance itself. They're going to eliminate about half of the current cabinet, reducing the spending, and try to cover the shortfall. That's what this article is about. That's basically what they're intending on doing. And somehow, they're going to achieve a fiscal surplus by 2020. That will not happen unless something miraculous occurs. I'd like to see the miracles created. If you can tell me where that's going to come from, please do. Embattled Argentina turns to farmers with, quote, really bad tax. Macri announces levy of 4 pesos a dollar through 2020. President calls for understanding amid a national emergency. Well, what do you do when you have a problem? You increase taxation. Big mistake. I like to see the fact that they're reducing spending. That's good. Reduce spending. but you're going to increase taxation on the farmers, these farmers are going to go bankrupt, they're going to be upset, and you're going to have a big problem. So it gets into this chart here along with that. Cash crops, macro tax soaring 2019 exports in bid to balance the budget. Soy, corn, and wheat, just showing you where that's going here. I think that it's important to understand where this is all going, and that is a massive devaluation. If they go ahead with the IMF's suggestions, meaning demands, they will be devaluing their currency significantly. If it's allowed to free float, going to be a big issue. Imagine they've been putting billions and billions and billions of dollars out there, and still it's being devalued so rapidly. Throughout 2018, it's been so weak, and it's only going to continue. And I'm interested to see where it goes. I will be covering it here very regularly on the channel. This is very important to understand because those holding real assets all this time have been benefiting. That's factual. They have been benefiting throughout this, and maybe it's still tough, maybe it's not easy, but it's going to be better for those holding real assets that keep up with the inflation. Many countries are experiencing this today. It's not just Argentina. And stay tuned to the channel because I'm going to be covering this country and all other countries out there. This is the most global channel you will find. So definitely stay tuned. If you found that informative, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, it helps to support the channel. I do appreciate that very much. Just hit that button for me, please, and thank you. All right. If you want the financial education you were not taught in schools, these two books have it all. You learn everything from A to Z. You can check them out at the link in the description. If you're more interested in the audiobook, you can get that at themoneygps.com.